The Seventh Tower by Garth Nix. Book 5. Into Battle. Chapter 8. No spirit shadows lay in wait for Milla, Audrus, and Malin. As Milla cautiously crept out into the lowest of the underfolk levels, she wondered whether the 3 spiky-snouted spirit shadows had perished from their wounds or lack of light. Or perhaps they had gotten lost, or had not reported their find. Whatever had happened, she was grateful. Not that she was afraid of fighting shadows. She simply preferred the battle to be fought when she had a great host of specially armed and armored icecarls behind her. This trip was a raid, and airweed was the prize they sought. In fact, they could not return without it, for their own supply was now exhausted. It took Milla a moment to reorient herself as Malin climbed out behind her. She had taken extra care to memorize all the twists and turns of the heatways, but had not paid particular attention to the underfolk levels. Even so, she had subconsciously mapped it all in her head, as any good icecarl would do. "This way," she said decisively, pointing down the plain, whitewashed corridor. Its ceiling held occasional, weak, undersized sunstones, and consequently the hallway had many shadows. Natural shadows, Milla was pretty sure, though she was ready to strike with a talon if necessary. Audrus noticed the tension in Milla's hand and stayed back with Malin. Not that the crone liked this. She kept trying to move away, only to have Audrus keep up with her. "We have to go along here, and then down a stair, through a banish wood forest, then down a steep tunnel into the lake where the airweed grows. From there it's very easy to get to the Free Folk Fortress," Milla explained quietly after she had checked the next intersection. They turned the corner, but Milla didn't keep going. Instead, she stopped and frowned in thought. "Though there's bound to be an easier way, if only we could find one of the free folk. Perhaps we should wait a little while here. They found us easily enough before." "I would not be sorry to rest a little," said Malin. As before, she hadn't complained, but the heat, the bad air, and the pace Milla had set had clearly taken their toll. Her golden hair, normally perfectly straight, was bedraggled and her face was flushed. Only her strange crone's eyes were unchanged, still that deep, luminous blue. "Rest then," Milla said. Malin gratefully sank down, putting her back against the wall. Audrus sat next to her, ignoring the crone's angry look. Milla didn't rest. She paced quietly back and forth, keeping an eye down both corridors while she thought about how much airweed they would need. Assuming an average of 2 bulbous nodules were required per person to get through the patches of bad air, a force of 2,000 icecarls would need 4,000 nodules. That was a lot of airweed to get to the far reaches of the heatways, particularly since whoever carried it would also need to use 4 nodules, there and back. Yet one person could probably carry 20 or 30 strands, each with 6 nodules. That was 120 per trip, less the 4 they used themselves was 116. Milla kept calculating. She wished she had a tally stick, a flat piece of bone with holes and pegs that shipmasters and clan chiefs used in their calculations. Leading icecarls into battle wasn't as easy as Milla had imagined. She had always assumed it was simply a matter of leading the battle from the front, that someone else would have to think about food and supplies and all such matters. A distant noise interrupted her calculations. Instantly, she was on the alert. Malin heard it too, and leapt up. Only Audrus stayed sitting. In fact, she yawned. Though Milla hadn't recognized the initial sound, she knew those that followed it. Footsteps. Stealthy footsteps. She could only catch them every now and then, a slight scuff or a less than totally careful footfall. Someone, or several someones, were creeping along the corridor from the heatways. Milla knelt down and looked around the corner, keeping low. She saw 4 shapes creeping down one side of the corridor, staying as much in the shadows as they could. Milla smiled as she saw them. The leader was a tall boy with sandy hair, held back with a white bone comb. He was followed by a blonde girl, then a little further back by a small boy who walked with a hesitant step. Last came a stocky, solid girl who had an oversized apron over the grimy underfolk robe that they all wore, along with a string of airweed over her left shoulder. All of their robes had been painted with the letter F. It was Clovel, Gil, Ferric, and Inkie. Milla kept watching them to see if they were followed by anyone else. There was a slim chance they had been taken by the enemy or were being forced to do Sushin's bidding. Milla couldn't see anything following them. When they came to the hole where Milla had climbed out, they spread out around it and drew their knives. Clovel peered down quickly, then stepped back. "No one there," he said quietly. "Guess we'd better go down farther and take a look." Milla stepped out into the corridor. "What for?" she asked. All 4 free folk jumped, and Ferric let out a nervous squeak. "You!" Clovel exclaimed. "Milla!" Gil cried. "You didn't die!" Gil had been the one to show Milla the way to the heatways, and they had talked quite a bit. She now looked very pleased to see the ice carl again. Ferric shivered and stayed silent. Inkie scowled. As far as Milla knew, Inkie never spoke at all. Milla clapped her fists together in greeting. The free folk nodded or waved or did nothing according to their natures. "Where's Aldris?" asked Gil. "I'm here," Aldris replied, drifting out behind Milla, taking a wide berth around her left hand and the talon. "I have another ice carl with me too," said Milla. "The crone, Malin." Malin stepped out and clapped her fists. The free folk hadn't flinched at Aldris, but they were obviously cowed by Malin. Milla tried to remember what she had told them about the crones. "I greet you," said Malin, "as do all the crones of the clans." The free folk approached warily, though they did put their knives away. "What's with the crown?" asked Clovel, pointing at the bone circlet on Milla's head. "And I thought you were going to freeze yourself to death or something, weren't you?" "I wasn't allowed to go to the ice," Milla replied stiffly. "It's hard to explain. The circlet is because I have become... Well, it's either because I'm the living sword of Astir, or the war chief of the Ice Carls. I'm not sure which." Clovel and Gil were clearly impressed by this news. Ferric looked afraid. Inkie looked the same as she ever did, imperturbable. What does that mean?" asked Gil. "And why did you come back?" "I would explain," said Milla. "But we should go to your fortress. There were spirit shadows in the heatway tunnels, and they may have alerted Sushin or others to our presence." "Spirit shadows?" asked Clovel urgently. "Free ones, without chosen? Were they with some of the Fatalists? Underfolk, I mean. We heard that 2 water stirrers were forced to carry lanterns for them, and one of Ebbet's alarms went off, so we thought they'd gone down here. In fact, when the alarm sounded again, we thought it was probably them coming back." "They won't be coming back," said Milla. "The spirit shadows killed them." "Killed them?" exclaimed Gil and Clovel, as Ferric shivered even more. "But why?" "I don't know," said Milla. "Come, we mustn't keep talking here. We must go to your fortress and talk to Ebbet and Crow." The 4 free folk looked at one another. "You haven't heard, then?" asked Gil hesitantly. "Heard what? We've only just climbed out of the heatways." Gil was at a loss for words. She looked at Clovel. He opened his mouth, but didn't say anything. Everyone got a surprise when Inkie spoke. "Your friend Tal fought with Crow," she said in a deep and husky voice. "Crow threw his knife. Tal brought the ceiling down on him, and us, and cracked a steam pipe. Ebbet arrived just in time to make a shield of light around us all, but Crow had already been hit on the head, and the spell took a lot out of Ebbet. They're both unconscious back at the fortress. Jarnell thinks they're going to die."